A quiet dread about money can haunt even the most successful lives. This fear of financial ruin is not just about numbers in an account. It is a heavy psychological burden that steals sleep and clouds judgment. But what if this pervasive anxiety is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what we can actually control? Ancient Stoic philosophy offers a startlingly clear answer. It teaches that our terror of losing wealth is a classic case of mistaking externals, things outside our absolute command, for parts of ourselves. Stoicism is not a promise to avoid hardship. It is a manual for constructing an unshakable internal citadel, a fortress of character that stands firm no matter what happens to your external fortune. By the end of this, 20 distinct mental frameworks, each a practical tool to systematically disarm the fear of financial loss and build genuine, unshakable resilience. These are not quick fixes or simple affirmations. They are profound shifts in perspective that rewire your relationship with uncertainty itself. How might your life change if the thing you fear most could no longer shake your core? This entire journey begins with a single, powerful distinction. The very first mindset for overcoming financial fear is to clearly separate what is yours from what is not. Stoic philosophy rests on this bedrock principle, known as the dichotomy of control. It asks a deceptively simple question: what truly belongs to you? The answer is not your bank account, your property, or your investment portfolio. Your only true possession, the one thing no external event can ever strip from you without your consent, is your faculty of choice. This is your capacity to form judgments, to direct your desires and aversions, and to choose your response to any situation. Everything else, including money, the behavior of markets, the stability of your job, these are classified as externals. They are things we may prefer to have, and it is perfectly rational to work for them, but they are not part of our core self. They are guests in our life, not the foundation of our identity. Understanding this distinction is like turning on a light in a dark room. The fear of financial ruin often comes from believing we might lose something that is fundamentally ours, a piece of our very being. But if we see money for what it is, a preferred external tool, the nature of the fear changes. Imagine a sudden market crash. The event itself, the falling numbers, the economic ripple effects, these are entirely outside your direct control. They are external, but your judgment of that event, your internal narrative that labels it a personal catastrophe or an insurmountable disaster, that is yours to command. One person might see a crash and spiral into panic, believing their security has been obliterated. Another, applying this Stoic lens, sees the same event and thinks, this is an external circumstance. My wealth has been affected, but my capacity for reason, my ability to adapt, and my character remain intact. The domain of what you can genuinely fear losing shrinks dramatically. You cannot ultimately lose what was never truly yours to begin with. You can only lose your grip on your own reasoned judgment. By anchoring your sense of self to your unassailable inner citadel, your power of choice, you create a buffer between external events and your internal peace. The storm may rage outside, but within the walls of your own mind, you hold the authority. This is not passive resignation. It is the ultimate form of empowerment because it redirects your energy from futile worry over the uncontrollable to the deliberate cultivation of the one thing you can always control, your mindset. Anchoring your identity to your inner citadel changes everything, but it demands a practice. The second mindset is perhaps the most counterintuitive tool in the Stoic arsenal, a deliberate exercise called the premeditation of evils. This is not about pessimistic worrying. It is a proactive psychological inoculation. The goal is to mentally rehearse potential losses, not to dwell on them in fear, but to disarm their shocking power through rational examination. Think of it as a fire drill for the soul. By calmly walking through a scenario you dread, you systematically prove to yourself that you can handle it, that your core self remains intact even if your external circumstances change dramatically. The Roman statesman Seneca wrote extensively about contemplating poverty. He did not do this to make himself miserable. He did it to see the reality clearly, to realize that poverty, while undesirable, was not the absolute terror his imagination had constructed. He would remind himself that many people live with very little and still find joy, purpose, and dignity. The monster in the shadows loses its form when you shine the steady light of reason upon it. So let us apply this. Take a moment to visualize a specific financial fear, perhaps the loss of a job or a significant portion of your savings. Do not let the initial wave of panic be the end of the story. Instead, guide your thoughts with reason. If this happened, what would be the very first practical step? You would update your resume. You would contact your network. You would examine your expenses. You would realize that many comforts are preferences, not necessities. You would remember the skills you possess and the resilience you have shown in the past. The point of this exercise is not to attract misfortune, but to achieve a profound realization. You see the sequence of actions you would take. You see that your ability to think, to adapt, and to persevere does not vanish with your bank balance. You prove to yourself that survival is not only possible, but that a life of dignity and purpose is not contingent on a single external condition. This practice builds a deep psychological preparedness. It makes the feared outcome feel less like an absolute cliff and more like a difficult path you have already scouted in your mind. When you have already faced the possibility in the calm theater of your thoughts, the actual event, should it ever occur, loses its capacity to paralyze you. You have already been there, you have already walked through the steps, and in doing so, you reclaim a tremendous amount of power from the unknown. Once you have walked through the fire drill of potential loss, a deeper transformation becomes possible. This is the third mindset, a phrase that sounds almost mystical but is intensely practical: Amor Fati, the love of fate. This is the Stoic art of embracing whatever happens, not with passive resignation, but with active, even grateful engagement. It is the decision to see every event, including financial setbacks, as a necessary thread in the fabric of your unique life. Think of it this way: a ship's captain does not curse the storm wind. He cannot control it. Instead, he learns its patterns, adjusts his sails, and uses that very same wind to navigate toward his destination. The storm is not an enemy to be hated. It is the condition of the journey itself. Amor Fati asks you to adopt the mindset of that captain toward your own life circumstances, especially the difficult ones. When financial hardship arrives, the instinctive reaction is often resentment. We see ourselves as victims of an unfair world, a narrative that feels true but is ultimately disempowering. Amor Fati interrupts that story. It asks a radical question. What if this setback is not a mistake in the script of your life, but a crucial plot point? What if fate, or the unfolding of events, has delivered this challenge not to break you, but to reveal strength you did not know you possessed? This is where mere acceptance evolves into appreciation. You begin to look for the opportunities that only hardship can present. A tightened budget forces ingenuity, revealing creative solutions you never needed before. It clarifies what you truly value, stripping away the clutter of meaningless spending. It builds a resilient strength, the kind that only comes from having weathered a storm and knowing you can do it again. Financial ruin, from this perspective, is not a dead end. It is a severe and unexpected turning point. The path you were on has crumbled, but a new landscape, however rough, now lies before you. Amor Fati is the courage to look at that raw, unfamiliar terrain not with dread but with curiosity. What can be built here? What simpler, more authentic version of a good life might emerge from this ground? This mindset does not mean you enjoy the pain of loss. It means you respect its role as a teacher. You love your fate because it is yours, the only raw material you have been given to craft a life of character. By choosing to meet misfortune with this kind of purposeful courage, you cease to be a passive character in your own story. You become its author, finding meaning not in spite of the struggle, but within it. And when you can find meaning, you discover a resource far more dependable than money. This profound shift in perspective brings us to a cornerstone of Stoic financial psychology, the concept of the preferred indifferent. The phrase sounds contradictory at first. How can something be both preferred and indifferent? This is the precise mental model that dismantles the emotional power money holds over us. To the Stoics, the only true good is virtue, the excellence of your own character, your wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Everything else that lies outside your direct moral choice, they called indifference. These are the vast array of things that do not, in and of themselves, make you a good or bad person. Your wealth, your social standing, even your physical health fall into this category. They are indifferent to your moral worth. Yet, the Stoics were not ascetics who rejected the world. They recognized that among these indifferents, some are naturally preferable. It is perfectly rational, according to nature, to prefer having health over illness, a good reputation over infamy, and sufficient wealth over poverty. These things allow us to live comfortably, to care for our families, and to contribute to our communities. So money is a preferred indifferent. It is a tool we wisely prefer to have, but it remains fundamentally separate from our core identity and moral worth. The suffering begins when we make the category error of treating a preferred indifferent as if it were a true good. We attach our happiness and self-worth to it. We believe that losing it would diminish us as people. This is the root of the terror of financial ruin. We fear we are losing a part of our soul, when in reality, we are only at risk of losing an external tool. Adopting this mindset means learning to hold wealth lightly, like a borrowed book from a library. You appreciate its value, you use it with care and intention. You derive benefit and knowledge from it, but you never forget that it is not yours to keep forever. You are its temporary steward. This detachment is not cold or uncaring. It is the source of tremendous freedom and, paradoxically, leads to far wiser financial decisions. When you see money as a preferred indifferent, your choices are no longer driven by the desperate fear of loss or the greedy hunger for more. You are free to pursue it rationally, invest it prudently, and spend it meaningfully. You can walk away from a risky, fear-based gamble because your sense of security is not tied to the outcome. You can make a generous donation without anxiety because you understand the tool is meant to be used for good, not hoarded as a proxy for your worth. Your financial life becomes a calm, deliberate practice of management rather than a constant emotional battlefield. The storm of market volatility might shake the shelves, but it cannot shake you because you were never the library. You were always the thoughtful reader who knows that the story of your character is written in choices, not in possessions. Holding wealth lightly is a philosophy, but it requires a practice of the body. The fifth mindset moves from theory into the realm of direct experience, a concept known as voluntary discomfort. This is the deliberate, temporary choice to step away from ease and comfort in order to prove a profound truth to yourself. You do not merely think about resilience, you actively train for it. Think of an athlete preparing for a marathon. They do not just read about running, they subject their body to rigorous training under difficult conditions. Voluntary discomfort is the Stoic equivalent of that training regimen for the soul. It is a practical stress test for your peace of mind. The goal is to regularly remind your nervous system that comfort is a preference, not a necessity, and that your well-being is not held hostage by external conditions. This practice can take many simple forms. It could be choosing to skip a meal and fast for a day, not for dietary reasons, but to remember that hunger is a temporary sensation you can observe without panic. It could be taking a cold shower, a direct confrontation with the instinct to seek only warmth and ease. It might mean wearing simpler clothes for a day, or turning off the constant stream of digital entertainment to sit quietly with your own thoughts. One powerful modern application is instituting a monthly frugality day. On this day, you consciously spend nothing beyond absolute necessities. You eat from your pantry, you find free entertainment in a park or a library, you experience the rhythm of a simpler, slower day. The purpose is not to punish yourself or to glorify poverty. The purpose is normalization. You are systematically dismantling the terror of involuntary loss by willingly and safely experiencing a lower level of material comfort. In that controlled environment, you make a crucial discovery. You are still you. Your capacity for thought, for gratitude, for noticing a beautiful sky remains completely intact. You prove to yourself, in a way no amount of theorizing ever could, that hardship is endurable. This practice builds a deep and quiet confidence, a muscle memory of contentment that does not rely on external abundance. When the market dips or an unexpected bill arrives, the psychological shock is less severe. Your mind has already been here. You have already navigated a day with less and found it not only manageable but perhaps even clarifying. Voluntary discomfort transforms the unknown monster of financial loss into a familiar, manageable challenge you have trained for. It turns the fear of deprivation into a simple question of logistics. What would I do? You already know because you have practiced the answer. This self-imposed training ensures that if fate ever forces a harder season upon you, you will not be meeting it for the first time. You will be greeting an old, if stern, teacher. The real power of voluntary discomfort lies in the confidence it builds here and now. This brings us to the sixth mindset, a profound shift in attention that can silence the loudest financial anxieties. Fear of ruin is almost never about the present moment. It is a ghost story we tell ourselves about a future that does not exist. The mind races ahead, constructing vivid scenes of foreclosure, of shame, of helplessness. We suffer not from a present reality, but from a terrifying fiction we are writing in our own heads. Stoicism offers a direct and powerful antidote, the disciplined focus on the present task. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal about the infinity of the past and the future, and the narrow, fragile ledge of the present. He reminded himself that the past is gone, a memory, and the future is a vast and unknown sea. The only ground on which he could actually stand, the only place where his will could exert any force at all, was the thin strip of the present moment. This is not a call to ignore planning or preparation. It is a strategic redirection of mental energy. Anxiety about financial ruin pulls your mind into that frightening future, draining your focus and paralyzing your capacity to act. The Stoic response is to gently but firmly bring your attention back to the single, manageable duty right in front of you. The overwhelming question of how you will survive a potential crisis 10 years from now shrinks into a series of simple, present-tense actions. Your duty is not to solve a hypothetical catastrophe. Your duty is to do excellent work on the project in front of you today. Your duty is to review today's budget line by line, to make a prudent grocery list, to learn one new skill in the hour you have available. When your mind starts to spin about market crashes, you acknowledge the thought, and then you return to the spreadsheet, the customer email, the lesson you are studying. You anchor yourself in the concrete reality of what you can do right now. This practice transforms the amorphous terror of the future into a sequence of purposeful, present-moment steps. Imagine standing at the base of a sheer cliff, overwhelmed by the thought of the entire climb. The anxiety is paralyzing, but the only way to ever reach the top is to focus entirely on finding the next secure handhold, and then the next one after that. The cliff is the uncertain future. The handhold is the present task. Financial security is not built in a single, anxious leap. It is built brick by brick, decision by decision, in the quiet focus of today. By concentrating on the quality of your work now, you make yourself more valuable and resilient for any future. By managing today's resources wisely, you strengthen your position for tomorrow. The future you fear is disarmed not by worrying about it, but by being fully and competently engaged in the now. The present moment is the only place where you have any real agency, and it is in this small, immediate space that you construct the foundation for all the tomorrows to come. The present moment is where you build, but it requires a blueprint not for a palace of endless acquisition, but for a home of true sufficiency. This brings us to the seventh mindset, a radical act of self-definition in a world that screams for more. The Stoics understood that the fear of financial ruin is often not a fear of having nothing, but a fear of not having everything. It is the terror of falling behind in a race with no finish line. The antidote is to consciously, deliberately, define what enough means for you. Ancient philosophers like Seneca observed that nature's needs are few and easily met. Food, shelter, basic clothing, community. Everything beyond that is an addition, a preference layered on by culture and comparison. The modern world, however, is a machine designed to make the definition of enough endlessly elastic. It whispers that security is one more promotion away, that happiness lives in the next purchase, that your current level of comfort is merely a stepping stone to something grander. This constant upward shift of the goalposts is a primary engine of financial anxiety. You are always running, yet the finish line keeps moving, so you live with the persistent fear that you might stumble before you reach it. The Stoic practice is to stop running that race. It is to plant a flag firmly in the ground and declare, "Here is my line, here is enough." This is not a calculation of bare survival. It is a thoughtful, personal assessment of what you genuinely need to live a life of purpose, health, and reasonable comfort, free from the stress of scarcity. It includes nourishing food, a safe home, resources for your family's well-being, and the means to continue learning and growing. The power of this act is immense. Once you have your clear, internal benchmark, your relationship with money transforms. Everything you have up to that line is your fortress of sufficiency. Anything you acquire beyond it is a welcome bonus, a tool for greater generosity or experience. And crucially, if you were to fall slightly below that line due to circumstance, you are not cast into the abyss of ruin. You are simply operating closer to the core of your defined needs, within a realm you have already psychologically mapped as manageable. This mindset ends the exhausting and fearful chase for more. Imagine two people looking at their bank statements. One has no internal definition of enough, so their statement is always a measure of lack, a reminder of what they do not yet have. The other has defined their enough, and their statement is a measure of abundance, showing them they are secure within their own chosen parameters. The first person lives in anxiety, fearing any loss as a step backward in a race they can never win. The second lives in a state of gratitude and calm preparedness, seeing both gains and potential losses from a position of established strength. By defining enough, you are not limiting your potential. You are liberating your peace of mind from the tyranny of limitless desire. You build your financial life on the solid ground of sufficiency, a ground that no market fluctuation can ever erode. A fire does not destroy quality iron, it reveals and refines it. This is the eighth mindset, a complete inversion of how we perceive hardship. The Stoics held a principle that sounds almost like a riddle: what stands in the way becomes the way. An impediment to action can, if met with the right character, actually advance the action. This is not mystical thinking. It is a practical recognition that every obstacle, including every financial setback, contains within it the exact conditions needed to build a specific form of strength. The obstacle is not a barrier to your progress, it is the path itself. Apply this to the landscape of money. A sudden job loss is undeniably difficult. It is an external event that disrupts your plans, but within that disruption lies the necessary condition for cultivating the virtues of courage and adaptability. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the choice to move forward with purpose despite the fear. You cannot practice true courage in a state of perfect security. The job loss, as painful as it is, provides the raw material, the forge and the fire, where your courage can be tempered and made real. Similarly, a mountain of debt can feel like a prison. Yet, that very constraint becomes the perfect training ground for the virtues of discipline and frugality. Discipline is easy to talk about when your accounts are overflowing. It is only when you must consciously say no, when you must creatively stretch a dollar, when you must distinguish between a want and a need with stark clarity, that discipline ceases to be an abstract idea and becomes a lived skill. The debt does not stand in the way of financial health, it becomes the very way you learn to achieve it, one disciplined choice at a time. This mindset transforms your relationship with financial threats. You stop seeing them as monsters waiting to ruin you and start seeing them as stern but effective trainers. The market crash is not an annihilation of your security, it is a masterclass in patience and perspective. The failed investment is not proof of your foolishness, it is a rigorous lesson in humility and research. Each challenge presents a question not of how do I escape this, but of what virtue does this situation demand of me? What quality of character can I forge in this heat? By asking this, you reclaim agency from circumstance. The narrative shifts from victimhood to authorship. You are no longer a passive figure being battered by financial winds. You are an active participant in your own development, using the friction of the world to sharpen your spirit. The goal is not to avoid the fire, but to learn what kind of metal you are made of, and to let the flames reveal a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. The obstacle is not your enemy, it is your most demanding teacher, and the curriculum is your own character. Your personal financial story is a single paragraph in an epic that spans millennia. The ninth mindset invites you to step back and read the whole book, an exercise the Stoics called the view from above. It is a deliberate shift in perspective, a mental journey from the claustrophobic room of your own worries to the open vista of cosmic time and human history. Close your eyes for a moment and picture not your bank statement, but the earth as a pale blue dot in the vast blackness of space. Think of the countless generations that have come before you, each with their own triumphs and tragedies, their own gains and catastrophic losses. Entire empires built on unimaginable wealth have crumbled into dust, their gold now buried under centuries of soil. Fortunes greater than any modern billionaire could conceive have evaporated, their owners long forgotten. In this grand, sweeping timeline, your financial anxiety, however intense it feels in this moment, occupies a vanishingly small point. This is not meant to diminish your experience, but to contextualize it. You are participating in a universal human condition. From the mightiest pharaoh to the simplest farmer, every person who has ever lived has faced the fundamental uncertainty of material existence. They have all known the potential for loss, the struggle for security, the fleeting nature of worldly possessions. Your fear is not a unique curse, it is a shared chapter in the human story. Practicing this view shrinks the monster of personal financial ruin down to its true size. It becomes a single thread in an immense and intricate tapestry. This does not make your practical challenges disappear, but it drains the existential dread from them. When you are consumed by a financial problem, it feels like the entire world is ending. The view from above reminds you that the world is ancient and immense, and it has endured far worse. Your crisis, while real to you, is a temporary weather pattern on the face of a timeless planet. This perspective fosters a profound equanimity. It gently mocks the self-importance of our worries. how grand we feel in our panic, how central our drama seems. The view from above is a humbling and liberating antidote. It asks, will this matter in 100 years, in 1,000? The answer is not that your life lacks meaning, but that your peace need not be hostage to a single chapter of it. You can attend to your finances with diligence and care, while simultaneously holding the quiet knowledge that this, too, is part of a much larger flow. Your ledger is a grain of sand on a shore shaped by infinite tides. This awareness does not promote irresponsibility. It cultivates serenity within responsibility. You do your part, you manage your grain of sand wisely, but you release the burden of believing you must control the ocean. From this higher vantage point, the fear of financial loss loses its power to define you. You see yourself as a brief, conscious spark in a long, long story, and that spark is far too precious to be dimmed by the fear of losing what was never truly yours to keep. The most valuable asset you possess can never appear on a balance sheet. While the previous mindset pulled us outward to the cosmic scale, this one brings us back to the most intimate ground of all, the inner citadel of your character. This is the 10th mindset, the ultimate Stoic answer to financial fear. Your character is your true wealth. For the Stoics, the only things that could be classified as genuine good were the virtues, the excellences of the human soul: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Everything else, all the money, property, and status in the world, were merely preferred indifferents, tools to be used well or poorly. This is not a poetic metaphor, it is a philosophical bedrock. If your true wealth is your character, then no external event, no market crash, no bankruptcy can ever plunder your treasury. They can take your coins, but they cannot take your courage. They can freeze your accounts, but they cannot freeze your capacity for just action. They can strip you of possessions, but they cannot strip you of wisdom. This realization flips the entire script on financial ruin. Ruin is redefined. It is no longer a state of your bank account, it is a state of your character. You are only truly ruined if you respond to loss with cowardice, with dishonesty, with panic, or with greed. Conversely, if you face a financial storm with courage, integrity, clear thinking, and self-control, you emerge not poorer but richer. Your true portfolio has grown in value. The practical shift this demands is profound. It means investing more of your daily energy and attention into strengthening your character than into merely accumulating money. You'll begin to see every financial decision as a character decision. Choosing to save rather than impulsively spend is not just good finance, it is an exercise in temperance. Doing thorough research before an investment is not just prudent, it is an act of cultivating wisdom. Being honest in a business negotiation, even when it might cost you a short-term gain, is a direct deposit into your account of justice. And when a crisis hits, the primary question changes entirely. The fearful mind asks, how much did I lose? The Stoic mind asks, how wisely and courageously am I responding? Imagine two neighbors who both suffer significant investment losses in the same market downturn. The first is consumed by the numbers. He obsesses over the portfolio statement, falls into despair, lashes out at his family, and makes frantic, fear-driven decisions to try to recoup the loss. He has, in the Stoic sense, compounded his financial loss with a far greater loss of character. The second neighbor feels the same initial sting, but then turns his attention inward. He acknowledges the fear but chooses to face the situation with calm reason. He gathers information, consults trusted advisors, adjusts his plans without panic, and maintains his composure and kindness at home. He has lost money, but he has gained in fortitude and self-mastery. His true wealth is intact and even enhanced. This mindset offers the ultimate insulation against fear. When you know that your core worth is unassailable, that it is built on choices only you can make, the terror of external loss loses its fangs. You stop playing a game where the rules are written by volatile markets and unpredictable events. You start playing a different game entirely, one where you define victory not by your net worth but by your net character. In this game, you cannot lose unless you choose to. And that is the most secure investment you will ever make. Your house is more than a structure. It is a repository of memories and a symbol of security. Now take a deep breath and in your mind picture it gone. This is not a call to invite disaster, but a deliberate extension of the Stoic fire drill into the very heart of your material world. The 11th mindset is the practice of negative visualization on your specific possessions, a direct application of premeditatio malorum to your car, your savings account, your most cherished belongings. You are not doing this to scare yourself, but to perform a precise psychological surgery, cutting the invisible cords of attachment that bind your peace of mind to physical objects. Begin with something significant. Visualize your home with all its familiar comforts being taken from you. Do not rush past the initial pang of loss. Sit with it, then guide your thoughts forward. Where would you go? You would find shelter, perhaps with family, in a temporary rental or in a simpler space. You would realize that the walls did not contain your relationships or your capacity for joy. You would recall the utility the house provided, the shelter from storms, the warmth in winter, the space for gatherings. You feel gratitude for that utility, not as a permanent possession, but as a temporary service it provided. Now consider your car. Imagine it is suddenly not there. For a moment, feel the inconvenience, then trace the practical steps. You would arrange other transport, you would walk more, you would rediscover your local neighborhood. You might even sense a subtle, unexpected freedom from maintenance, insurance, and the constant worry of damage. The object is gone, but the memory of its utility remains, and your ability to adapt emerges stronger. Apply this same mental exercise to your financial accounts. Visualize the numbers dropping to zero. Observe the cold wave of fear, and then move deliberately past it. What skills do you have that are not listed on that statement? What relationships could you rely on? What simple, foundational knowledge about living well would still be yours? This practice systematically converts attachment into appreciation. You stop seeing your car as my car, an extension of yourself, and start seeing it as the car, a useful tool that is currently in your care. This shift is profoundly liberating. The root of financial fear is not the loss of money itself, but the attachment to it, the belief that it is a permanent part of your identity. By mentally rehearsing the loss of possessions, you prove to yourself, in the safe theater of your mind, that you are more than your belongings. You are the conscious being who used them, and that consciousness cannot be taken. Each time you do this, you weaken the associative chain that links an external object to your internal sense of safety. The object begins to hold its proper place in your life as a valued but temporary guest, not as a foundational pillar of your being. When you can look at your most valued possession and honestly think, I would miss this, but I would be okay, you have disarmed the terror of ruin at its source. You have not become indifferent to the world. You have become resilient within it, capable of deep gratitude for what you have precisely because you have already let it go in your heart. A financial loss is a fact, but a catastrophe is a story you tell yourself. This distinction lies at the heart of the 12th mindset, a Stoic practice of seeing events as they are, not as our fears instantly label them. The ancient teachers observed that nothing in the external world is inherently good or bad. An event is simply an event. It is our faculty of judgment, our internal narrator, that rushes in to assign a value, to paint it with the colors of disaster or fortune. The fear of financial ruin is not the reality of having less money. It is the judgment that having less money is a personal and unmanageable catastrophe. This automatic labeling is the source of our panic. The Stoic intervention is to insert a pause, a moment of conscious suspension between the event and the judgment. When news of a market drop or an unexpected expense arrives, your first instinctual thought might be, "This is a disaster, my security is gone." The practice is to notice that thought, and then to gently set it aside as a preliminary opinion, not a final verdict. You then turn your attention to the raw, neutral facts of the situation. The statement is, "I have experienced a financial loss. This has created a new set of constraints on my resources. Now, within these new constraints, what are my available options?" This shift in language is a shift in power. It moves you from the emotional realm of victimhood, where a catastrophe is happening to you, into the practical realm of agency, where a problem exists for you to solve. Imagine two friends receive the same letter from their bank, informing them of a clerical error that temporarily freezes a significant portion of their savings. The first friend immediately jumps to the catastrophic judgment. "This is a nightmare. Everything is ruined. I can't pay my bills." This thought triggers a cascade of stress hormones, clouding their thinking and leading to frantic, unhelpful calls. The second friend feels the same initial jolt of alarm but applies the Stoic pause. They say to themselves, "The fact is, a portion of my funds is currently inaccessible." This creates a constraint for the next few weeks. Now, what are my options within that constraint? They might review their remaining liquid accounts, contact essential service providers to explain a brief delay, and prioritize absolutely necessary spending. They address the same problem, but from a state of calm clarity rather than blind panic. The circumstance is identical, but the internal experience and the quality of the response are worlds apart. This mindset trains you to become a fair judge of your own life's events, not a biased prosecutor always arguing for the worst possible outcome. It asks you to examine the evidence dispassionately. Is this situation truly an annihilation, or is it a difficult change? What resources, internal and external, remain at my disposal? By focusing on the options within the new constraints, you engage your problem-solving mind, the very part of you that can navigate a way forward. The fear of ruin thrives in the vague, shadowy future your judgment creates. It withers under the clear, factual light of present-moment options. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, would periodically practice living on the simplest of fare. He did this not as a temporary diet, but as a profound declaration of independence. He knew a secret that forms the 13th mindset, the art of contentment with little. This is not about romanticizing poverty or rejecting comfort. It is about developing a psychological flexibility so robust that your sense of well-being can flourish across a wide spectrum of material conditions. The great Stoic figures, from the austere Cato to the affluent Seneca, demonstrated that inner peace was not a product of their surroundings, but a quality of their character. They could dine in opulent halls or on plain bread with equal dignity because their feast was internal. This ability to derive deep satisfaction from non-monetary sources is perhaps the most powerful defense against the fear of financial loss. It is the practice of broadening your portfolio of happiness. Think of your joy as an investment fund. If 100% of your assets are tied up in a single, volatile stock, say the stock of material luxury, then every market dip sends you into a panic. But what if you diversified? What if you held significant shares in other, more stable markets, the market of deep relationships, the market of learning and curiosity, the market of natural beauty, the market of simple physical pleasures like a walk in the sun or a good conversation? A financial downturn might affect one sector of your portfolio, but it cannot cause a total crash. Your well-being remains buoyed by these other, more resilient holdings. This is the art of contentment with little, learning to extract profound value from experiences that cost nothing. It is the satisfaction of mastering a new skill through a library book. It is the deep connection forged in an honest, unhurried talk with a friend. It is the awe felt at a sunset, a feeling no ticket price can enhance. When you cultivate these sources of joy, you perform a crucial recalibration. You prove to your own nervous system that abundance is not a number in an account. It is a quality of attention. The potential loss of financial assets transforms from an existential threat into a logistical challenge because it cannot wipe out your capacity for gratitude, for curiosity, for love. You begin to see money for what it is, a useful tool for acquiring certain comforts and enabling certain experiences, but not the generator of happiness itself. That generator is your own engaged mind and heart. By practicing this art, you build a life that is rich in the truest sense, insulated from the fluctuations of fortune. Your peace becomes portable, independent of any address or account balance. And in that independence lies a freedom more valuable than any dividend, the freedom to face any financial future not with dread, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that their real treasure is already secure. The market has crashed and your careful investments have been halved. The contract you relied on has fallen through. These are the moments that test the very architecture of your mind. After you have done everything within your power, after the sound judgment and the diligent effort, there remains a final, critical mindset. This is the art of accepting what you cannot change, a practice often mistaken for weakness, but which is in fact the ultimate act of rational strength. It is not passive resignation. It is the clear-eyed acknowledgement of a new reality, so you can stop fighting ghosts and start building with what is actually left in your hands. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, born into slavery and familiar with harsh limits, framed it with piercing clarity. He said, "Suffering arises not from the events themselves, but from our judgments about them and our continued struggle against what is already true." When you rage against a financial loss that has already occurred, when you drown in denial or self-pity, you are not protesting the event. That event is already in the past, a fact. You are protesting reality itself, and in that futile struggle, you create a second, entirely unnecessary layer of pain. The first pain is the loss. The second pain, the one you generate yourself, is the exhausting, soul-draining resistance to that loss. Acceptance is the decision to feel the first pain fully, and then to refuse to manufacture the second. Think of a sailor caught in a sudden, powerful storm. He cannot command the wind to cease or the waves to flatten. After he has secured the hatches, trimmed the sails, and done all a skilled mariner can do, his final task is to accept the storm's presence. He does not waste his last reserves of energy shaking his fist at the rain. He conserves his strength, maintains his bearings, and prepares to navigate the new conditions the moment the weather breaks. Your financial storm is no different. Acceptance means looking at the red numbers on the statement and saying, "This is the current reality. My wealth is at this level now." This statement contains no judgment of catastrophe, no narrative of failure. It is a simple inventory, a map of the new territory you must now traverse. From this place of clear-eyed acceptance, your emotional energy is no longer siphoned off by anger or despair. It is preserved and redirected into the next constructive step. That energy becomes the fuel for updating your financial plan, for exploring new income streams, for finding creative ways to reduce expenses. The person who cannot accept the loss remains psychologically stuck at the moment of impact, reliving the blow, exhausting themselves in a mental battle they cannot win. The person who practices Stoic acceptance takes the blow, absorbs it, and then turns their entire being toward the question of what to do next. This mindset transforms you from a victim of circumstance into a resilient responder. It acknowledges that while you cannot control every outcome, you always retain sovereignty over your response. By accepting the facts without adding the poison of futile resistance, you keep your mind clear, your will strong, and your path forward unobstructed by the debris of your own unnecessary suffering. The way you navigate a financial storm writes a permanent chapter in the story of your life. This is the 15th mindset, a profound reframing that transforms hardship from a random misfortune into a legacy-defining performance. Your response to potential ruin is not just a reaction, it is a revelation of character, a public and private demonstration of who you are when the comfortable facade is stripped away. The external event, the loss itself, is merely the stage. The legacy is written by your performance upon it. This mindset asks a single, piercing question. In the face of this test, will your actions be a testament to bitterness and dishonesty, or to resilience and integrity? Every choice becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of your reputation and your own self-respect. Consider a business owner facing an unavoidable bankruptcy. The financial outcome, the closure of the company, is largely set, but the human outcome is entirely within her control. She has a spectrum of choices. On one end, she could vanish in the night, leaving employees unpaid and creditors furious, seeding a legacy of betrayal and cowardice. On the other end, she could call a meeting with her team, explain the situation with painful honesty, work transparently with creditors to settle what she can, and help her employees find new positions. The financial result for her personal wealth might be similar in both scenarios, but the legacy is diametrically opposed. One path leaves a trail of destruction and a reputation in ruins. The other, while still marking a professional ending, builds a monument of honor and responsibility that people will remember for years. This is the shift in focus from the external event to the internal performance. The bankruptcy does not define her. Her conduct throughout the bankruptcy defines her. The virtues she demonstrates under pressure, like fortitude to face the music, justice in treating others fairly, and wisdom in navigating the process, become permanent possessions. No court can seize them, no creditor can claim them. They are etched into her character and into the memory of everyone involved. This perspective turns the terror of financial ruin on its head. The fear is no longer just about losing money. It becomes a fear of failing the test, of revealing a weaker character than you hope to possess. But this is a productive fear, one that directs your energy toward rising to the occasion rather than merely avoiding the fall. It makes the challenge about something you can actually control, your own conduct. When you see a financial crisis as a legacy-defining moment, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" You start asking, "How will I choose to meet this? What story do I want this chapter to tell?" Your response becomes your most enduring asset, a lesson for your children, a memory for your community, and a private knowledge for yourself that you can weather the hardest winds with your principles intact. In the long view, people may forget the exact dollar amount you lost. They will never forget how you carried yourself through the loss. That memory, that legacy of character, is a form of wealth that no market can ever touch. A financial loss slams one door shut with a force that echoes. Yet in that silence, if you listen closely, you can often hear the faint click of another door, previously hidden, now beginning to unlock. This is the 16th mindset, a focused application of the principle that the obstacle is the way. It is the active, determined hunt for the opportunity nested within every setback, transforming the passive fear of ruin into a scavenger hunt for potential. The event itself is neutral, but your orientation toward it determines everything. You can face it as a wall, or you can choose to see it as a sudden, unexpected detour that might just lead to a better destination. Consider the story of a mid-level manager who is laid off from a stable but unfulfilling corporate job. The initial shock is real, the fear of the unknown is palpable. This is the slammed door. The traditional narrative is one of loss and crisis, but the opportunity hunting mind does not stop there. It begins to ask new questions. What did I tolerate in that job for the sake of security? What skills did I use that I actually enjoyed? What have I always wanted to try but never had the time or courage to pursue? This forced opening in his schedule, while financially frightening, becomes a blank canvas. It might lead him to retrain in a field he is passionate about, to start a small consultancy based on his deepest expertise, or to take a lower-stakes job that allows for a richer family life. The job loss did not create these possibilities, they always existed, but it removed the comfortable inertia that kept him from seeing them. The setback acted as a necessary catalyst, pushing him through the fear and into a realm of potential he would have never voluntarily chosen. The same principle applies to a forced downsizing of lifestyle. Imagine a family that must sell their large home and move into a smaller apartment after a financial reversal. The loss of space and status is initially painful, but within that constraint, a new simplicity can emerge. They spend less time and money on maintenance and more time on shared experiences. They discover that the clutter of possessions was also a clutter of mind. The financial pressure, while difficult, forces a clarity about what truly brings them joy, often revealing that it was never the square footage to begin with. This mindset requires a deliberate pivot in attention. When the bad news arrives, after you have processed the initial facts and emotions, you consciously begin the hunt. You ask, what could this make possible? What old limitation has it removed? What new path is now the only path forward? You are not denying the difficulty. You are simply refusing to let the difficulty have the final word. You are searching for the hidden gift in the harsh lesson, the seed of a new beginning buried in the rubble of the old one. By training yourself to look for the opening in every closing, you disarm the future of its power to paralyze you. You begin to meet uncertainty not with dread, but with a quiet curiosity, wondering not what you will lose, but what unexpected opportunity this change might be ushering into your life. The greatest fortunes in history now rest in museums or beneath forgotten fields. This undeniable truth is the foundation of the 17th mindset, a practice the Stoics called Memento Mori, remember you must die. While this phrase may sound stark, its application to wealth is not a morbid fixation, but a profoundly liberating calibration of perspective. It is the conscious remembrance that all things, without exception, are temporary. Your body, your relationships, your possessions, and every cent you will ever earn exist within the relentless flow of time. To believe otherwise, to build your sense of security on the illusion that your financial state is permanent, is to construct a house on a riverbank and be shocked when the waters rise. Memento Mori, when applied to money, is the gentle but constant whisper that change is not an anomaly. It is the fundamental law of nature. This realization dismantles the feeling of violation that often accompanies financial loss. If you deeply understand that your wealth was always a temporary guest in your life, its departure, however untimely, is not a personal betrayal by the universe. It is simply the natural order of things unfolding. This is not a call to nihilism or carelessness. It is the opposite. When you release the desperate grip of permanence, you are freed to become a wise and attentive steward rather than a fearful hoarder. Think of a gardener who knows the seasons are always turning. She does not weep in despair when autumn comes and the leaves fall. She appreciated the summer's abundance while it lasted, and she prepares the soil for the next cycle. She tends her garden with diligence, not with the anxious hope that she can stop time, but with the respectful understanding that her role is to work harmoniously within its flow. Your financial life is that garden. The practice of remembering impermanence encourages you to manage your resources with prudence and foresight, precisely because you know conditions will change. You save for winter not as a paranoid act, but as a rational adaptation to nature's rhythm. You invest not with the fantasy of endless growth, but with the clear-eyed goal of nurturing what you have for the seasons ahead. This mindset transforms your relationship with risk and loss. A market downturn is no longer a catastrophic rupture in a permanent edifice. It is a seasonal shift in a landscape you knew was always dynamic. The fear that tightens your chest when you check a volatile account begins to loosen because you are not checking the status of a monument. You are reading the weather report for your garden. You can take sensible action without being consumed by the terror that this change is final. It never was. By holding the temporary nature of all wealth in your mind, you cultivate a serene detachment that allows for both deep appreciation and graceful release. You enjoy prosperity without the underlying anxiety of its inevitable passing. You meet scarcity without the added despair of believing it defines your forever. Your security stops being a number you are trying to freeze in place and becomes the resilient skill of navigating change itself. In the end, the practice of Memento Mori asks you to build your peace on the only permanent truth available, the truth of the present moment, and your capacity to meet it with character, regardless of what the ledger says today or what it may say tomorrow. Your inner citadel is not a metaphor for withdrawal, but for ultimate defense. This 18th mindset is the synthesis of all the others, the construction of a psychological fortress so secure that the most violent financial storms cannot shake its foundation. The Stoics envisioned the wise person as possessing an inner citadel, a sanctuary built not of stone but of unassailable principles and reasoned judgments. The walls of this citadel are your practiced virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. The gates are guarded by your faculty of choice, your proherses. And the treasure it protects is your peace of mind and moral integrity. When the news of a loss strikes, when the panic of potential ruin begins to rise in your chest, you do not have to stand exposed in the open field of that fear. You have a place to retreat, a command center from which to view the siege with clarity. Inside the citadel, the noise of the external world, the crashing markets, the alarming headlines, the whispers of what if, becomes a distant rumble. They are events happening outside the walls. They cannot reach the core of who you are unless you personally open the gate and invite them in. This is the practical application of the dichotomy of control. The citadel contains only what is truly yours, your judgments and your character. Everything else remains outside. Cultivating this inner stronghold is not a one-time event. It is a daily discipline of fortification. Every time you study a Stoic text and reflect on its meaning, you are adding a stone to the wall. Every time you pause before reacting to a financial worry, exercising your proherses, you are reinforcing the gate. Every act of voluntary discomfort is a training exercise for the garrison within. The practice of negative visualization is a reconnaissance mission, scouting the terrain so no external event can take you by surprise. You are not building this citadel out of paranoia, but out of profound self-respect. You are declaring that your inner world is sovereign territory, and you will defend its peace with diligent practice. So when the fear of financial ruin arises, as it inevitably will, your trained response is to consciously retreat inward. You take a breath and you step back from the swirling thoughts. You remind yourself, this event is outside the walls. My judgment of it, my response to it, is inside where I hold command. From this place of calm self-possession, you can assess the situation not as a terrified victim, but as a composed strategist. The problem may be large and serious, but it is now a logistical challenge to be managed, not an existential threat to your being. This mindset offers the deepest form of resilience. It means that no matter what happens to your accounts, your core self remains intact, unplundered, and capable of directing the recovery. Your wealth can be scattered, but your citadel cannot be sacked. This is the Stoic promise of true invulnerability, not to circumstance, but to the tyranny of circumstance over your soul. A financial reversal often carries a second, silent tax, the crushing weight of what other people might think. This 19th mindset confronts the social dimension of fear head-on, the deep anxiety of appearing poor, of being seen as a failure, of losing the subtle currency of respect that we often mistake for our actual worth. This is where the dichotomy of control becomes a social survival tool. The opinions of others, their judgments, their whispers, their pity, or their scorn are classic externals. They exist entirely outside the walls of your inner citadel. You have as much direct control over another person's private thoughts as you do over the weather. To tie your self-worth to such an uncontrollable, fickle external is to anchor your ship to a passing cloud. True disgrace from a Stoic perspective is never found in a diminished bank account. It is found only in acting without virtue, in choosing dishonesty over integrity, cowardice over courage, or foolishness over wisdom in the face of hardship. The person who faces financial loss with dignity, honesty, and resilient effort has nothing to be ashamed of, regardless of the number of zeros in their account. The person who maintains a lavish facade through deceit or who crumbles into bitter resentment while still wealthy is the one who bears true disgrace. This mindset demands a conscious decoupling of your identity from social status and material display. It asks you to define your success by the quality of your character and your actions, not by the symbols you can afford to purchase. Imagine two neighbors. One loses his high-paying job and, consumed by shame, hides from his community. He stops attending gatherings, makes excuses, and spirals into isolation, his anxiety compounded by the story he believes others are telling about him. The other neighbor experiences the same loss. He feels the sting, but he consciously releases the burden of others' opinions. He might say to his friends with simple honesty, "I am navigating a career transition right now, so I will be living more simply." He shows up as himself, his value undiminished by his changed circumstances. The first man's fear of ruin is a tangled knot of practical worry and social terror. The second man's fear is purely practical. He has peeled away the thick, suffocating layer of social anxiety, leaving only the logistical challenge to be solved. Managing a tight budget is difficult enough. Managing a tight budget while also trying to maintain an expensive illusion for your peers is an impossible, soul-crushing burden. By letting go of the opinions of others, you reclaim an enormous amount of energy and focus. That energy is no longer spent on keeping up appearances, on the defensive explanations, on the envy of others' seemingly perfect lives. It is freed to be poured into the real work of rebuilding, learning, and adapting. Your path forward becomes clearer because you are no longer looking sideways to see who is watching you walk it. You are looking ahead at the terrain itself. The fear of financial ruin, when stripped of its social costume, becomes a simpler, more manageable problem. It is no longer about the loss of your very self in the eyes of the world. It is about the practical recalibration of resources, and a practical problem, however difficult, always has a practical solution waiting to be discovered by a mind that is clear, unburdened, and finally free to think for itself. The final mindset completes the entire architecture, inviting you to see your financial journey not as a solitary struggle, but as a single note in a grand, harmonious symphony. This is the Stoic concept of providence, the belief in a rational and interconnected cosmos, a logos where nothing is truly random or meaningless. From this perspective, a financial reversal is not a chaotic event that happens to you, but a necessary development that happens for you as part of a purposeful unfolding far greater than any individual ledger. This is similar to the love of fate, but it adds a dimension of trust, a sense of being an active participant in a meaningful story, even when the current chapter feels difficult. It is the ultimate replacement for fear because it transforms uncertainty from a threat into a form of guidance. Imagine a master weaver at a loom. From the backside, where the individual threads are worked, the pattern looks like a chaotic tangle of knots and loose ends. There is no discernible image, only confusion and apparent disorder. This is the view from the ground, the moment-by-moment experience of our lives, especially during hardship. A sudden financial loss feels like a snapped thread, a flaw that ruins the entire piece. But the Stoic asks you to consider the possibility of a front side to the tapestry, a completed design where every thread, even the dark and knotted ones, contributes to a beautiful, coherent picture. You are holding the single thread of your life, and you cannot see the full pattern. Providence is the trust that a pattern exists, that the weaver is skilled, and that your thread, with all its twists and turns, is essential to the whole. A financial setback, then, is not a mistake in the weaving. It is the introduction of a necessary contrast, a depth of color, or a change in texture that will make the final image richer and more complete. This mindset does not require a specific religious belief. It is an orientation of trust in the fundamental rationality of the universe. It is the decision to interpret events not as malicious or random, but as material for your growth. When you lose a job you relied on, you can see it as a cruel twist of fate, or you can choose to see it as the cosmos gently or firmly pushing you off a comfortable plateau and onto a path you were too hesitant to choose for yourself. A path that may lead to work more aligned with your true strength. When an investment fails, it is not proof the universe is against you. It might be a masterclass in humility and discernment, a lesson that needed to be learned before you were entrusted with greater resources. This perspective fosters a profound and active patience. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me? What quality is this situation demanding that I develop?" The fear of ruin dissolves because ruin itself is redefined. In a providential universe, there is no such thing as a dead end, only a redirected path. Your task is not to control every outcome, but to learn the steps of the dance as the music plays, trusting that the melody has a structure, even when you cannot hear the full orchestra. By adopting this final mindset, you step out of the narrow cell of personal catastrophe and into the open air of a participating citizen in a meaningful cosmos. Your financial life becomes one expression of a larger journey, and in that vast, interconnected story, every loss is a potential turning point, every constraint a new shape for creativity, and every ending the quiet beginning of a wisdom you could have earned no other way. The 20 mindsets you have explored are not a checklist but a single, integrated practice. They are the daily exercises for building one supreme virtue, courage. Not the courage of a fearless hero, but the quiet, steadfast courage to face uncertainty without being ruled by it. The core message of this entire journey is not a promise of financial security. No philosophy can guarantee that. It is the offer of something far more valuable, a complete transformation of your relationship with uncertainty itself. You learn to see uncertainty not as a predator stalking your peace, but as the very atmosphere in which a meaningful life is lived. Each mindset, from the dichotomy of control to the view of providence, is a tool for constructing an inner stability that no external event can shake. This is the ultimate goal, freedom. Not freedom from money, but freedom within the world of money. It is the freedom to pursue wealth wisely, to enjoy it gratefully, and to face potential loss with a calm mind, because your sense of self is no longer chained to the numbers on a screen. You are no longer a slave to the fear of losing what you have. You become the master of your response to whatever may come. This freedom is available to you not when your investments are perfect, but right now, in your next conscious choice. So do not feel you must adopt all 20 mindsets at once. Start small. This week, choose just one. Perhaps it is the practice of focusing only on the present task when anxiety about the future arises. Maybe it is defining clearly and in writing what enough means for you. Or it could be a single session of negative visualization on a possession you cherish to feel the liberation of loosening its grip. Practice it deliberately. Notice the subtle shift in your peace of mind. Then, when you are ready, layer in another. This is how courage is built, not in a day, but through consistent daily repetition. We would love to hear about your journey. In the comments below, share which mindset you are choosing to practice, or any questions that arose for you as we explored these ideas together. Your experience becomes part of this ongoing conversation about building a life of unshakable resilience.